Charles Darwin had a problem. In 1859, when he published On the Origin of Species, he confessed something that troubled him. If complex organisms appeared suddenly in the fossil record without a long chain of simpler ancestors, his entire theory would face serious difficulties. And that's precisely what the rocks seem to show. 540 million years ago, something unusual happened in Earth's oceans. Over roughly 20 million years, brief by geological standards, nearly every major group of animals appeared. Eyes, brains, predators and prey, mineralized skeletons, complex nervous systems. Scientists call this the Cambrian Explosion, and it remains one of the most remarkable transitions in the history of life. Imagine an ocean dominated by simple, soft-bodied creatures. They filter water, absorb nutrients, grow slowly. Now imagine that same ocean transformed within a few million years. Armored organisms with compound eyes containing thousands of individual lenses. Predators with grasping appendages and crushing mouthparts. An evolutionary transformation unlike anything before or since. How did this happen? What does it reveal about the nature of evolution itself? And why should you, 500 million years later, care about creatures that disappeared long before dinosaurs existed? Before we explore those questions, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Your support makes this work possible. To understand what makes the Cambrian Explosion remarkable, we need to see what came before. The Ediacaran period lasted from 635 to 540 million years ago. Nearly 100 million years, 3 times longer than the entire age of dinosaurs. And during this immense span, life remained relatively simple. The Ediacaran seafloor was covered with unusual organisms that look alien to modern eyes. Dickinsonia was an oval creature, sometimes reaching a meter across, flat as a pancake. It probably absorbed nutrients directly through its body surface. Scientists still debate whether it was truly an animal or something else entirely. Perhaps a failed evolutionary experiment, a body plan that led nowhere. Charnia resembled a fern frond, anchored to the seafloor, filtering particles from the water. Motionless, patient. It could do nothing but wait for food to drift past. Kimberella was slightly more sophisticated. It could crawl across the seafloor, leaving distinctive trails in the sediment. But slowly, perhaps millimeters per minute. No rushing, no urgency. This was a world without predation. For 100 million years, organisms coexisted without hunting each other. There was no chasing, no armor, no defensive spines, no strategies for escape. The ocean was something like a quiet garden where organisms grew, reproduced, and died without the terror that would come later. Then something shifted. Around 540 million years ago, most Ediacaran organisms disappeared. The exact reasons remain unclear. Perhaps environmental changes, perhaps competition from new organisms with different designs. But their departure cleared the stage for what came next. Write in the comments what city you're watching from. I'm genuinely curious. What triggered the Cambrian Explosion? Scientists have identified several factors that converged during this window of time. First, oxygen. By the beginning of the Cambrian, atmospheric oxygen had reached roughly 10 to 15% of modern levels. This matters enormously. Aerobic metabolism, using oxygen to burn fuel, provides about 19 times more energy than anaerobic processes. That's the difference between passive filter feeding and active swimming, between slow crawling and rapid escape, between simple responses and complex behaviors requiring sophisticated nervous systems. Second, the breakup of the supercontinent Rodinia. Around 750 million years ago, all the continents were joined into one massive landmass. As Rodinia fractured and the pieces drifted apart, new shallow seas formed along continental margins. These shallow seas provided ideal habitat, plenty of sunlight for photosynthesis, mineral-rich waters, diverse environments creating opportunities for specialization. Third, the evolution of Hox genes. These are genetic control switches that determine body organization during development. They specify where a head forms, where limbs develop, how segments are arranged. With this genetic toolkit, evolution could rapidly construct new body plans by modifying the expression of existing genes rather than inventing everything from scratch. Think of it as moving from sculpting each organism individually to having interchangeable modules that can be rearranged quickly. Fourth, the appearance of predation. At some point, one organism ate another, not by filtering bacteria or absorbing dissolved nutrients, but by actively hunting and consuming other complex organisms. This single innovation triggered cascading changes. Prey evolved defenses. Predators evolved better hunting tools. An evolutionary arms race began, and arms races accelerate change dramatically. Fifth, the availability of calcium in the oceans. Organisms discovered how to crystallize calcium carbonate and calcium phosphate into shells, armor, and internal skeletons. Suddenly, bodies could be rigid, protected, structurally complex in ways impossible for soft tissues alone. These 5 factors converged, and life responded with an explosion of experimentation. In 1909, a Canadian paleontologist named Charles Walcott made a discovery in the Canadian Rockies that would transform our understanding of the Cambrian. He found the Burgess Shale, a rock formation preserving not just hard shells and bones, but soft tissues, muscles, eyes, digestive tracts, internal organs. 505 million years ago, an underwater mudslide buried these creatures instantly, sealing them from oxygen before bacterial decomposition could erase the details. The result is extraordinary. More than 120 species preserved in exquisite 3-dimensional detail, a snapshot of a complete ecosystem frozen in time. The Burgess Shale revealed something unexpected. Cambrian life was wildly experimental. There were creatures with 5 eyes arranged across the head, organisms covered in defensive spines with no clear front or back, things with long, flexible appendages tipped with claws, the function of which remains debated. Nature was trying everything, testing possibilities that would later be abandoned. The Cambrian introduced several fundamental innovations that define animal life today. Bilateral symmetry, a body plan with left and right sides that mirror each other. This allows directed movement. You can have a head with concentrated sensory organs at the front, a tail for propulsion at the back, and a digestive system running between them. Most animals alive today, including you, have bilateral symmetry. It's so common now that it's easy to forget it was once an innovation. Segmentation, bodies divided into repeating units. Add more segments and you get more legs, more flexibility, more specialization options. Remove segments and you get a streamlined form. Segmentation provides modularity And modularity accelerates evolutionary change because you can modify one part without breaking the whole system. Specialization of body parts. Instead of every segment doing the same thing, different segments began specializing. Some limbs became walking legs, others became grasping claws. Still others became sensory antennae or mouth parts for processing food. Specialization allows organisms to do multiple things well simultaneously. These innovations, controlled by Hox's genes, allowed the rapid diversification we see in the Cambrian fossil record. And the results were spectacular. If the Cambrian had celebrities, trilobites were the superstars. They appeared 521 million years ago and survived until the Great Permian extinction 252 million years ago. That's 270 million years of existence, nearly 3 times longer than dinosaurs managed, and far longer than humans have existed in any form. Trilobites diversified into more than 20,000 known species. That's more species than all mammals, living and extinct, combined. They ranged from tiny forms the size of a fingernail to giants 70 centimeters long. They lived in shallow tropical seas and deep cold waters. Some burrowed in sediment. Others swam in open water. Some were predators. Others scavenged. The trilobite body plan was endlessly adaptable. But their most remarkable feature was their eyes. Trilobite eyes were compound, like those of modern insects, containing anywhere from dozens to more than 15,000 individual lenses. Each lens was a precisely shaped crystal of calcite, a form of calcium carbonate, stone eyes. Here's what makes this astonishing. Calcite is birefringent, meaning it normally splits light into 2 rays traveling at different speeds. This creates double images, which would make vision nearly impossible. But trilobites solved this problem through elegant physics. They oriented each calcite crystal along the optical axis, the one direction where birefringence is minimized. Light passing through this axis doesn't split. This is sophisticated optical engineering. Humans didn't understand the principles of crystal optics until the Dutch scientist Christian Huygens worked them out in the 1600s. Trilobites implemented these principles 500 million years earlier through natural selection. Each lens gathered light and focused it onto photoreceptor cells beneath. The brain then assembled hundreds or thousands of individual images into a mosaic view of the world. The resolution wasn't as sharp as a modern camera-type eye, but it was effective. Trilobites could detect movement at a distance, recognize potential mates, spot approaching predators. Vision changed everything. In a world where most organisms were still blind or had only simple light-detecting patches, trilobites could see. And seeing provided an enormous advantage in the evolutionary competition that was intensifying throughout the Cambrian. Now let's meet Anomalocaris. The name means abnormal shrimp, though it resembled nothing like a shrimp. When paleontologists first discovered fragments of this creature, they made an understandable mistake. They thought they were looking at multiple different animals. The circular mouth looked like a jellyfish. The spined appendages looked like shrimp bodies. The larger body sections were classified as a type of sea cucumber. Only when complete specimens were found in the Burgess Shale did scientists realize the truth. These weren't separate organisms. They were all parts of a single, formidable predator. Anomalocaris reached up to 1 meter in length, enormous by Cambrian standards when most organisms were measured in centimeters. It swam by undulating the flexible lobes running along both sides of its body, moving with surprising speed and agility through the water column. Its eyes were mounted on stalks and contained up to 16,000 lenses, more than most trilobites, more than many modern insects. It could see clearly at significant distances, track moving prey, navigate complex three-dimensional environments. But the mouth was the most extraordinary feature. 32 overlapping plates arranged in a ring, like the iris of a camera. When the plates contracted, they converged toward the center, creating crushing force. Fossilized trilobite shells show circular puncture marks that match the diameter and pattern of Anomalocaris mouths exactly. These aren't scratches or cracks from random damage. They're precise circular holes punched through mineralized armor 500 million years ago. Think about what this represents. We have forensic evidence of predation preserved across 500 million years. We can identify the predator, the prey, the method of attack. It's like finding a murder weapon at an ancient crime scene, except the crime happened before complex life even colonized land. Anomalocaris had two large appendages extending from its head, lined with sharp spines. These grabbed prey and held it while the mouth worked. A captured trilobite had essentially no chance of escape. The spines found the joints in its armor, broke them apart, and the mouth delivered crushing force to the exposed tissue. The existence of Anomalocaris transformed Cambrian oceans. Every other organism had to respond, develop thicker armor, evolve better escape responses, find hiding places, or face extinction. Predation creates intense selection pressure, and pressure accelerates evolution. Let's examine something stranger. Opabinia was small, about 7 centimeters long, with a segmented body and lobed appendages for swimming. It had 5 eyes, not 2 like most organisms, not 3. 5, arranged across its head in a way that made audiences laugh when Charles Walcott first presented its reconstruction at a scientific conference. Surely this was a mistake. Surely no real animal looked like this. But it was real. And perhaps the most unusual feature wasn't the eyes. It was the long, flexible proboscis extending from its head, tipped with a small grasping claw, probably used for probing seafloor sediment and extracting small prey or food particles. Opabinia left no living descendants. It was an evolutionary experiment that didn't continue. The lineage ended. But it reminds us that the Cambrian was full of designs that seem bizarre by modern standards. We're only familiar with the winners, the body plans that survived and diversified. The Burgess Shale shows us the losers, the experiments that nature tried and abandoned. Hallucigenia was so strange that scientists initially reconstructed it upside down. When it was first described in 1977, researchers thought the defensive spines were legs, and the actual legs were tentacles or feeding structures waving in the water. Only better specimens revealed the truth. It walked on paired clawed legs with a row of spines protecting its back. It was tiny, 1 to 2 centimeters long, but significant because it belongs to the Lobopodian lineage, which includes modern velvet worms. These creatures still exist today in tropical forests, nearly unchanged in basic body plan for 500 million years. They're living fossils, direct connections to the Cambrian world. But the most important Cambrian creature for you personally, Pikaia. Small, translucent, fish-like, perhaps 5 centimeters long. Utterly unremarkable compared to armored trilobites or predatory Anomalocaris. It probably filtered small particles from the water. It wasn't the top predator. It wasn't the most abundant species. It wasn't even particularly well protected. Yet Pikaia possessed something unique. A notochord, a flexible rod of cartilage running along its back, providing support for muscle attachment. This was the evolutionary precursor to your backbone. Pikaia was a chordate, a member of the lineage that would eventually produce fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and ultimately humans. 500 million years ago, this modest swimmer represented your ancestry. If it had gone extinct, and it easily could have, the entire vertebrate lineage would have ended there. No fish, no land vertebrates, no dinosaurs, no mammals, no humans. Your existence traces through an unbroken chain of survival back to this fragile creature navigating Cambrian seas. Pikaia wasn't obviously destined for success. It was one experimental design among hundreds. But the notochord provided advantages for swimming efficiency. Over millions of years, that cartilaginous rod ossified into bone became a true backbone, enabled the most successful group of large animals in Earth's history. But in the Cambrian, that future wasn't predetermined. Pikaia was simply another organism trying to survive in an increasingly competitive environment. Let's discuss something that reveals the sophistication of Cambrian ecosystems: parasites. A trilobite fossil from 510 million years ago shows a small creature attached to its underside, positioned between armor plates where the host couldn't dislodge it. This wasn't a symbiotic relationship providing mutual benefit. It was parasitism, one organism feeding on another without killing it immediately. The trilobite continued growing with this parasite attached, carrying the burden perhaps for its entire adult life. Imagine existing like that, functional, surviving, reproducing, but never free from something draining your resources. Today, more than half of all species are parasites or have parasitic life stages. Parasitism is one of the most successful evolutionary strategies. And it began, as far as we can tell, in the Cambrian. Once organisms had complex tissues and circulatory systems, parasites could evolve to exploit them. This requires sophistication, finding hosts, attaching without being dislodged, avoiding immune responses, timing reproduction to maximize spread to new hosts. We've also found coprolites, fossilized feces, containing shell fragments from multiple species. This tells us that predators were consuming prey completely, shells and all, then digesting the mineralized material. That requires strong stomach acids and specialized enzymes. Digestive biochemistry was already complex 500 million years ago. One particular coprolite from the Burgess Shale contains crushed fragments of 3 different trilobite species. Opportunistic feeding. And the fragments are thoroughly processed before digestion, suggesting the predator had structures for mechanically breaking down food, either chewing mouthparts or a muscular gizzard with grinding surfaces. Complex digestive anatomy appeared rapidly during the Cambrian. What about color? We tend to imagine ancient oceans as grey and murky, but modern oceans are full of color. Warning patterns, camouflage, mating displays. The Cambrian was probably similar. Some exceptionally preserved specimens show evidence of structural color. Microscopic surface patterns that create iridescence, like the shimmer on a beetle's shell or a soap bubble. This doesn't rely on pigments that decay. It's created by physical structure, and that structure can occasionally preserve. Why would a Cambrian organism need iridescence? Possibly for species recognition, identifying potential mates of your own species in murky water, possibly for warning coloration, advertising that you're toxic or dangerous, possibly for camouflage, breaking up your outline against a background of dappled light. We can't know for certain, but Cambrian seas were probably as visually rich as modern coral reefs. Here's something remarkable about scale. The largest Cambrian organism wasn't a predator. Aegirocassis, discovered in Morocco in 2015, reached 2 meters in length, taller than most adult humans. But it wasn't hunting. It was filter feeding, swimming with its mouth open, straining plankton through specialized bristled appendages. This tells us something important. Within just 15 million years after the Cambrian began, ocean ecosystems were productive enough to support filter feeders measuring 2 meters long. That requires enormous populations of plankton, high nutrient concentrations, complex food webs, transferring energy efficiently through multiple levels. The Cambrian Ocean wasn't just diverse. It was fertile, energy-rich, capable of supporting organisms that needed vast amounts of food. And here's the interesting twist. Aegirocassis is related to Anomalocaris, same family. The evolutionary relationship is clear from anatomical details. One lineage became an apex predator. Another became a gentle giant filtering microscopic organisms. This is adaptive radiation, a single ancestral body plan splitting into multiple ecological roles within just a few million years. Evolution creating not just new species, but fundamentally different ways of making a living. Before the Cambrian, sea floors across the world were covered with microbial mats, thick, sticky layers of bacteria and other microorganisms that stabilized sediments and prevented erosion. These mats had dominated shallow marine environments for billions of years. They were tough, cohesive, difficult to penetrate. Then burrowing organisms evolved, and they destroyed the mats. Burrowers churned through sediments, eating organic matter, processing mineral grains, breaking apart the microbial communities that had stabilized the seafloor. Within roughly 10 million years of the Cambrian's beginning, microbial mats went from globally dominant to rare, restricted to extreme environments where burrowers couldn't survive. Hypersaline lagoons, deep anoxic basins, places too harsh for complex animals. This changed ocean chemistry and ecology profoundly. Sediments became mobile, easily eroded by currents. Water became cloudier, affecting how far light could penetrate, which influenced where photosynthetic organisms could live. Nutrients that had been locked in stable mats became available, redistributed by currents and biological activity. The physical structure of the marine environment was transformed by organisms that were, in turn, responding to ecological pressures from predation and competition. This is ecosystem engineering, organisms modifying their environment in ways that change the rules for everyone. Beavers do this when they build dams. Humans do it when we construct cities. But it happened first in the Cambrian, when burrowing animals restructured the seafloor across the planet. Some Cambrian predators were probably cannibalistic. We have Anomalocaris body parts showing bite marks that match Anomalocaris jaws. Either they scavenged dead members of their own species, or they actively hunted each other. This makes evolutionary sense. If you're the apex predator and have no significant competition from other species, the main threat becomes other members of your own species competing for the same resources. They become potential prey. It's brutal but efficient. Modern sharks sometimes exhibit cannibalism. Orcas occasionally kill other orcas. When you're at the top of the food web, your own kind may be the only challenge you face. Reproduction in the Cambrian must have been diverse. Trilobites probably released eggs and sperm into the water column, relying on external fertilization like modern horseshoe crabs. But some Cambrian arthropods show clasping appendages that suggest internal fertilization, males transferring sperm directly to females. If internal fertilization existed, so did mate choice, females selecting which males to accept, males competing for access to females. This creates sexual selection, evolutionary pressure, not from survival challenges, but from mating success. And sexual selection can drive rapid evolution of elaborate structures. Bright colors, complex behaviors, ornamental features that have nothing to do with survival and everything to do with reproduction. Peacock tails, deer antlers, bird songs. These aren't adaptations for surviving predators or finding food. They're adaptations for convincing the opposite sex that you're worth mating with. And they evolve quickly because they're driven by preference and competition, not just environmental pressure. If sexual selection operated in the Cambrian, and the anatomical evidence suggests it did, it helps explain some of the bizarre ornamental structures we see in fossils. Not every spine and projection was defensive. Some may have been display structures, advertisements of fitness, signals to potential mates. We've found fossilized Cambrian embryos, microscopic, preserved in three-dimensional detail by phosphate minerals that replaced the original tissue. These are among the oldest animal embryos ever discovered, showing cells dividing, tissues differentiating, early body segments forming. They look remarkably similar to modern embryos, the same basic developmental sequences. This means the genetic programs controlling development, how a single fertilized egg becomes a complex multicellular organism, were already sophisticated 540 million years ago. Hox genes orchestrating body plans, signaling molecules coordinating tissue formation. The fundamental machinery of development was in place and functional. And crucially, these embryos are from lineages that went extinct. They're not your ancestors. They're evolutionary experiments that failed. Yet their developmental biology resembled modern development. We share deep molecular mechanisms with creatures that vanished 500 million years ago, leaving no descendants. The toolkit of life is ancient and conserved across vast evolutionary distances. Some fossil deposits show mass strandings, hundreds of organisms piled together, all oriented in the same direction, apparently killed simultaneously. Like modern whale beachings or schools of fish driven into shallow water by predators or storms, then stranded when tides recede. One Chinese fossil site shows more than 300 organisms per square meter, aligned as if swept by powerful currents, probably caught in a turbidity current, an underwater avalanche of sediment, and buried alive almost instantly. Mass death creating a snapshot of an entire community. These mass mortality events are tragic for the organisms involved, but scientifically invaluable. They give us complete cross-sections of ecosystems, not just isolated individuals. We can see which species coexisted, what size ranges existed, how populations were structured by age and development. They're photographs of complete Cambrian communities, frozen mid-existence. Some Cambrian arthropods had brains complex enough for learning and memory. We know this because rare phosphate-preserved fossils show brain structures with differentiated regions, not just simple nerve cords, but distinct lobes processing different types of information. Specialized brain regions enable more than reflexive responses. They allow organisms to store information, recognize patterns, modify behavior based on past experience. That's learning. And if Cambrian organisms could learn, they could adapt within their own lifetimes, not just across generations through genetic change. This means Cambrian predators could learn which prey species were dangerous, which were easy targets, where good hunting grounds were located. Prey could learn to recognize predator silhouettes, remember safe refuges, adjust activity patterns to avoid dangerous times. Behavior became flexible, context-dependent, intelligent in a rudimentary way. This accelerates ecological change because organisms respond to novel challenges without waiting for mutations to arise and spread through populations. A predator encountering new prey doesn't need to evolve over generations. It can learn within days or weeks. This makes ecosystems more dynamic, more responsive, more capable of rapid reorganization. The Burgess Shale preserves more than 20 body plans that left no living descendants. Entire designs tested by evolution and abandoned. Why did so many fail? One explanation is developmental constraint. Some body plans may have hit evolutionary dead ends. They couldn't be modified significantly without breaking fundamental aspects of development. Like buildings with flawed foundations, you can redecorate and add rooms, but you can't fix the core without tearing everything down and starting over. Another explanation is competitive exclusion. Perhaps these organisms were simply outcompeted by more efficient designs. Trilobites succeeded partly because their compound eyes were exceptionally effective. Chordates succeeded because notochords provided advantages for swimming and structural support. The losing designs weren't necessarily bad, they were second best. And in evolution, second best often means extinction. A third explanation is contingency. Some lineages may have been hit by localized disasters, volcanic eruptions, anoxic water events, toxic algal blooms that crashed their populations before they could recover. Meanwhile, related lineages in other geographic areas survived by chance. Luck matters, fitness matters. Both together determine outcomes. Probably all three factors operated simultaneously. Some body plans were developmentally constrained, some were outcompeted, some were unlucky. The Cambrian was a period of experimentation, and most experiments in any field fail. The handful that succeeded determined the future of animal life on Earth. In 2019, scientists working on Cambrian fossils from China made a remarkable discovery: preserved neural tissue. Not just the outline of where a brain once existed, but actual cellular structures, individual neurons, synaptic connections. The oldest nervous system tissue ever found, 518 million years old. The specimen shows a ladder-like arrangement, segmented ganglia connected by longitudinal nerve cords, each ganglion controlling one body segment. This is the basic arthropod nervous system architecture, still present in modern insects, spiders, and crustaceans. It proves that complex neural organization evolved incredibly early and has been conserved across 500 million years of subsequent evolution. We're looking at the actual wiring diagram of a Cambrian animal's brain. This creature could sense its environment through multiple sensory modalities, process that information through specialized neural circuits, make decisions about movement and behavior, and act on those decisions. And that architecture waited 500 million years for humans to evolve, develop paleontology, discover this fossil, and understand what it represents. The Cambrian created the blueprint for animal bodies. Your eyes, innovation from the Cambrian. Your segmented spine, Cambrian innovation. Your bilateral body with specialized front and back, Cambrian innovation. The nervous system reading these words, Cambrian architecture, elaborated and modified over time, but fundamentally the same design. Every major animal group alive today appeared during the Cambrian. Biologists recognize 35 phyla, the highest taxonomic rank grouping animals by fundamental body plan. All 35 appeared during the Cambrian or shortly before. And since then, across 520 million years of subsequent evolution, exactly 0 new phyla have emerged. We've only created variations on the original Cambrian themes. Why were body plans locked in after the Cambrian? Why has evolution since then been refinement rather than fundamental reinvention? Several theories exist. Developmental constraint is one. Once complex body plans became established through intricate networks of Hox genes and developmental signaling. Changing them fundamentally became nearly impossible without catastrophic failure. It's like trying to redesign the foundation of a building while people are living in it. Small modifications work. Radical restructuring breaks everything. Niche saturation is another explanation. By the end of the Cambrian, all major ecological roles were filled. Active predators existed. Filter feeders existed. Burrowers, swimmers, crawlers, sessile organisms. Every basic way of making a living had representatives. Radically new body plans couldn't find open niches to exploit. They'd be competing against established designs refined over millions of years. Genetic lock-in is a third factor. The developmental toolkit became so interconnected and interdependent that changing one component breaks many others. Early in animal evolution, the toolkit was simpler, more modular, easier to rearrange. By the end of the Cambrian, it had become integrated into a system where everything depends on everything else. Flexibility was traded for precision and reliability. Probably all three factors contribute. The Cambrian was a unique window when body plans were still flexible enough to modify radically, when ecological niches were empty enough to allow fundamentally new designs, and when genetic systems were modular enough to permit major reorganization. That window closed. Evolution since then has been impressive, producing whales and hummingbirds and humans, but it's all variations on body plans established 500 million years ago. The Cambrian teaches us something important about innovation generally. It happens when specific conditions align. Opportunities exist for new approaches. Resources are available to support experimentation. Constraints are minimal enough to permit radical change, and competition is intense enough to reward even small improvements. When these factors converge, change accelerates dramatically. This pattern appears beyond biology. Human technology experiences similar explosions. The Industrial Revolution, the Computer Revolution, perhaps the current artificial intelligence revolution. Rapid experimentation, high failure rates, eventual convergence on successful designs that then dominate for extended periods. Understanding the Cambrian helps us understand innovation itself as a process. Not steady accumulation of small changes, but pulses of rapid experimentation during windows of opportunity, followed by longer periods of refinement within established frameworks. Let's talk about ocean chemistry gradients in the Cambrian. The ocean wasn't uniform. Different depths had different oxygen concentrations. Coastal areas had different salinity than open ocean. Some regions had higher nutrient levels, others were relatively barren. Temperature varied with latitude and depth. These chemical gradients created ecological zones. Shallow, well-oxygenated waters supported maximum diversity. Plenty of light for photosynthesis, plenty of oxygen for active metabolism, abundant nutrients washing off nearby land. Deeper waters with lower oxygen supported fewer species, mainly those with physiological adaptations for low oxygen tolerance. Very deep waters were probably nearly lifeless, anoxic zones where only specialized bacteria survived. We can see this stratification in the fossil distributions. Burgess Shale organisms lived on a relatively shallow continental shelf. But other Cambrian deposits from deeper settings show different species compositions, more filter feeders, fewer active predators, different body forms optimized for low-energy lifestyles. This vertical zonation is crucial. The Cambrian wasn't creating one global ecosystem. It was creating multiple ecosystems stacked vertically in the water column and varying horizontally across ocean basins. Each zone had its own selection pressures, its own evolutionary trajectory. The Cambrian explosion was really multiple explosions happening simultaneously in different environments, occasionally exchanging species through migration, but largely evolving independently. Some organisms migrated vertically between zones. Juveniles in shallow water where food was abundant, adults moving deeper where predation pressure was lower. Or seasonal movements, shallow during productive seasons when food was plentiful, deeper during lean periods. Vertical migration added another dimension to ecosystem complexity, creating connections between otherwise separate communities. Here's something that changes how we think about Cambrian mobility. Many organisms were actually quite clumsy in open water. They were adapted for crawling on the seafloor, and when currents swept them up, they struggled. We know this from the fossil orientations. Some deposits show organisms preserved in clearly unnatural positions, upside down, twisted, obviously not in life posture. They were caught by currents, tumbled along the bottom, buried while disoriented. These weren't graceful swimmers exploring the water column. They were bottom dwellers, occasionally swept up by hydrodynamic forces beyond their control. This reveals different ecological strategies, even within species. Some individuals stayed in calm areas protected from currents, accepting limited food availability in exchange for safety. Others ventured into current-swept zones where food was more abundant, but the risk of being swept away was higher. Trade-offs between safety and opportunity. This created selection pressure for better swimming abilities. Over time, lineages that colonized the water column evolved streamlined bodies, more efficient propulsion, better sensory systems for three-dimensional navigation. But early in the Cambrian, most life was still tied to the seafloor, and swimming was a developing skill, not a perfected one. Seasonal variation almost certainly existed in Cambrian oceans. Modern oceans have pronounced seasons: spring plankton blooms, summer productivity, winter dormancy at high latitudes. The Cambrian would have experienced similar patterns because seasons are driven by Earth's axial tilt, which hasn't changed significantly. Some Cambrian organisms show growth rings in their mineralized shells, similar to tree rings. These record periodic growth, rapid during productive seasons when food is abundant, slow during dormant seasons when resources are scarce. This proves they experienced cyclical environmental changes and responded physiologically. Seasonal variation would have affected reproduction timing. Breeding when food is abundant ensures offspring have maximum survival probability. This creates synchronized reproduction across populations, everyone breeding simultaneously. That creates temporary superabundance of larvae in the plankton, which creates feeding opportunities for predators, which creates selection pressure for defensive adaptations in larvae. Seasonality adds temporal complexity to ecosystems. It's not just about who eats whom, but when. Predators might migrate to follow seasonal prey movements. Prey might time reproduction for seasons when predators are less active or abundant. An ecological chess game played across seasonal cycles, adding another dimension to evolutionary dynamics. How did Cambrian organisms navigate? Modern marine animals use multiple cues: sun position, magnetic fields, chemical gradients, topographic landmarks, even star patterns for species that surface at night. What did Cambrian organisms use? Visual landmarks seem likely for species with good vision living near the seafloor. Rocks, geological features, areas with distinctive sediment types. A trilobite with compound eyes could probably navigate visually within its home range, recognizing familiar features. Chemical cues, certainly. Organisms release dissolved substances, metabolic byproducts, pheromones, chemical signatures of their presence. These create gradients. Following a concentration gradient toward food or mates is simple but effective. Even organisms with no vision could navigate chemically. Water current direction, definitely. Even simple organisms can detect flow and orient accordingly. Moving upstream versus downstream, parallel versus perpendicular to currents, these create different movement patterns affecting where organisms end up. Magnetic sense, possibly. Some modern animals detect Earth's magnetic field for orientation. If Cambrian organisms had magnetoreceptors, iron-containing cells sensitive to magnetic fields, they could use geomagnetic information for long-distance navigation. We can't prove this from fossils, but it's plausible. Navigation shaped biogeography. Species with effective navigation could maintain the population connectivity across distances, preventing reproductive isolation. Species with poor navigation became fragmented into isolated populations, diverging genetically, eventually speciating. The evolution of navigation abilities directly influenced how rapidly new species formed. Ocean acidification affected the Cambrian just as it affects modern oceans. The ocean's pH, its acidity or alkalinity, influences how easily organisms can precipitate calcium carbonate for shells and armor. Lower pH makes biomineralization harder, requiring more energy and producing thinner, weaker structures. The Cambrian Ocean's pH varied regionally and temporally. Volcanic activity released carbon dioxide, which dissolved in seawater and lowered pH. Increased weathering of rocks on land consumed atmospheric carbon dioxide, raising pH. These fluctuations created variable selection pressure on shell-building organisms. Some trilobite lineages show temporal variation in shell thickness. Thicker shells during high pH periods when calcium carbonate precipitates easily. Thinner shells during low pH periods when biomineralization becomes metabolically expensive. They were responding physiologically to ocean chemistry changes, adjusting their investment in defense based on what was energetically feasible. This has direct parallels to today. Modern oceans are acidifying due to absorbed atmospheric carbon dioxide from industrial emissions. Shell-building organisms, corals, mollusks, certain plankton are struggling. The Cambrian demonstrates that ocean chemistry directly determines which organisms can succeed. It's not hypothetical. It happened before and shaped evolutionary outcomes. Some lineages survived acidification events. Others went extinct, unable to maintain protective structures in chemically hostile conditions. Some Cambrian organisms show evidence of problem-solving behavior. Trace fossils reveal burrows that suddenly change direction upon encountering obstacles, suggesting the organism sensed the obstruction and adjusted course. That's not reflexive. That's integrating sensory feedback into decision-making. Other feeding traces show systematic searching patterns. Organisms moving in expanding spirals, an efficient algorithm for finding randomly distributed food items. Not random wandering, but organized searching, suggesting the capacity to follow procedural strategies. Some fossils show what appears to be environmental manipulation. Organisms moving small shells or pebbles to create barriers or shelters, using objects in the environment for purposes beyond their natural occurrence. That's cognitively sophisticated, requiring recognition that objects can be tools. We shouldn't overstate this. Cambrian organisms weren't intelligent like mammals or cephalopods. But they weren't pure automatons either. They had nervous systems capable of flexible responses, possibly rudimentary learning, behavior modification based on experience. That's the beginning of behavioral complexity that would, over hundreds of millions of years, lead to genuine intelligence in certain lineages. Intelligence accelerates evolution. An organism that can learn doesn't need genetic mutations to adapt to novel situations. It adjusts behavior within its own lifetime, survives challenges its ancestors never faced, passes genes for learning capacity to offspring. Intelligence and evolution become intertwined, each amplifying the other. Did bioluminescence exist in the Cambrian? We can't know with certainty. Bioluminescent organs don't fossilize. But the biochemistry of bioluminescence is ancient, probably predating the Cambrian. And the ecological advantages, attracting prey, startling predators, communicating with potential mates, counter-illumination camouflage against downwelling light, are so significant that bioluminescence probably evolved as soon as organisms were complex enough to produce it. Imagine Cambrian oceans at night, mostly dark, but perhaps punctuated by flashes of light as organisms signaled each other. Glowing trails from disturbed bioluminescent plankton. Predators using light lures to attract prey, like modern deep-sea anglerfish. The possibility that Cambrian seas glowed in darkness is beautiful, reminding us that ancient ecosystems were as sensorially rich as modern ones. We tend to imagine the past as simpler, more primitive. But 500 million years ago, life was already sophisticated in ways we're still discovering. Complex vision, intricate predator-prey dynamics, possibly chemical communication networks we can only infer. Possibly bioluminescent displays we'll never see. The Cambrian was not a crude prototype. It was a fully realized biological world, different from today, but not lesser. Sea level changes profoundly influence the Cambrian. Multiple cycles of rising and falling sea levels, each lasting millions of years, dramatically affected available habitat. When sea levels rose, shallow seas flooded continental margins, creating vast expanses of warm, productive habitat. Perfect conditions for Cambrian life. Diversity increased. Populations expanded geographically. Species that were previously isolated came into contact, competed, hybridized occasionally, exchanged genetic material. When sea levels fell, those shallow seas drained. Populations became isolated in remaining water bodies. Habitats shrank. Competition intensified for limited resources. Many species went extinct. Survivors were forced into refugia, small areas where conditions remained tolerable. And there they either adapted to new constraints or disappeared. These cycles drove evolutionary patterns. Sea level rise created opportunities for diversification and geographic expansion. Sea level fall created extinction pressure and population isolation, leading to speciation. Rise and fall expand and contract, diversify and winnow. Sea level was an environmental metronome pacing evolutionary tempo. Organisms evolved responses to this cyclical pattern. Some became habitat generalists, capable of tolerating a wide range of conditions: deep or shallow water, variable temperature and salinity, different food availability. They survived sea level changes. Others became specialists, exquisitely adapted to specific shallow water conditions. They thrived during high stands, but suffered during low stands, sometimes recovering when sea levels rose again, sometimes going extinct permanently. The Cambrian landscape, or seascape, was dynamic, not a stable stage where evolution played out, but an active participant shaping which lineages persisted and which vanished. The end of the Cambrian wasn't marked by catastrophic mass extinction like the asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs. It was a gradual transition into the Ordovician period, but with significant turnover in species composition. Many Cambrian lineages disappeared. Trilobites continued, but with different dominant families replacing earlier ones. Brachiopods diversified extensively. New predators appeared, early nautiloids with shells and tentacles, more efficient than Anomalocaris in certain contexts. The ecosystem reorganized. Why? Probably multiple converging factors. Climate change. The planet was cooling, altering ocean circulation patterns and nutrient distribution. Chemical changes. Ocean chemistry evolving as weathering patterns shifted with changing continental configurations. Biological factors. New predators outcompeting older designs. New body plans proving more efficient for exploiting existing resources. The end Cambrian wasn't sudden catastrophe. It was gradual replacement, species by species, ecosystem restructuring over millions of years. Less dramatic than asteroid impacts, but equally transformative in cumulative effect. This teaches us something about evolutionary transitions. They're not always punctuated by disaster. Often they're gradual, barely perceptible in any single generation, but revolutionary in aggregate. The Cambrian ended not with sudden death, but with slow transformation into something new. Would the Cambrian explosion have unfolded differently if we could rewind time and replay it? This question touches on fundamental issues about the nature of evolution. One perspective. The Cambrian was deeply contingent, dependent on specific accidents. If Pikaia had gone extinct by chance, vertebrates never evolve, and Earth's history changes completely. If trilobites had evolved slightly different eye structures, the trajectory of vision evolution diverges. Tiny accidents cascade into enormous consequences. Replay the tape, get entirely different outcomes. Another perspective? The Cambrian was largely inevitable. Given certain conditions, complexity emerges reliably. Eyes evolve because light carries information, and detecting it provides advantages. Predation emerges because consuming other organisms is energetically efficient. The specific details differ if you replay the tape, but broad patterns repeat. The truth probably lies between. Some aspects were contingent. Which specific lineages survived often depended on luck, on being in the right place when disaster struck elsewhere. But some aspects were probably inevitable. Given oxygen, nutrients, and genetic systems capable of generating variation, complexity increases. The pathway to complexity varies, but the destination may be similar. This matters philosophically. If evolution is highly contingent, we're extraordinarily fortunate to exist. Countless accidents had to align correctly. If evolution is largely inevitable, complexity might be common throughout the universe wherever conditions permit life. The Cambrian won't answer this definitively. That requires finding other examples, other origins of complexity, ideally on other planets. But it gives us one data point. On Earth, when conditions allowed, complexity exploded. Whether that's a universal pattern or a unique accident remains unknown. The Cambrian created the foundation for everything you are. Your eyes detecting these words, Cambrian innovation. Your brain processing their meaning, Cambrian architecture elaborated over time. Your spine holding you upright, descended from the notochord in Pikaia. Your ability to sense touch, temperature, pain, sensory systems that emerged when organisms needed to navigate complex, dangerous environments. You are not observing the Cambrian from outside. You are the Cambrian's continuation. Every cell in your body contains DNA copied with modifications through an unbroken chain back to those ancient seas. You are continuous with that world, not metaphorically, but literally, biochemically, anatomically continuous. This should create perspective. Your individual life is brief, decades at most. But you're part of continuity spanning hundreds of millions of years. The same molecular machinery keeping Cambrian organisms alive keeps you alive. The same physical laws shaping their evolution shape yours. Your existence traces through every extinction event, every climate catastrophe, every predator and parasite and competitor that threatened your ancestors. And none of those threats succeeded in breaking the chain. An unbroken lineage from Cambrian seas to this moment, and you're the current expression of that continuity. That's simultaneously humbling and profound. You're insignificant, one organism among billions. And you're significant, a link in a chain that must not break, carrying forward something ancient and precious. The Cambrian also teaches about innovation and adaptation. Those organisms that evolved armor, sophisticated eyes, predatory behaviors. They were taking risks. Armor costs energy. Eyes are complex and can fail. Predation exposes you to counterattack. But staying static meant extinction in a changing world. Your life involves similar dynamics. The world changes rapidly, technologically, environmentally, socially. Staying static feels safe, but may not be. Innovation involves risk, but creates possibilities. The Cambrian demonstrates that periods of rapid change favor organisms that can adapt, experiment, try new strategies. This doesn't mean reckless risk-taking. Evolution isn't random gambling. It's trying things, keeping what works, discarding what fails. That applies to navigating your own life. Experiment thoughtfully. Learn from failures. Iterate toward success. And remember that most experiments fail. The Burgess Shale contains far more failures than successes. Organisms that tried something, persisted briefly, then vanished. Failure is normal. success is exceptional. But success happens often enough that complexity increases over time. Failed experiments aren't wasted. They explore possibilities, and occasionally one works spectacularly. Thank you for this journey through deep time, for caring about events that happened 500 million years before you were born, for recognizing yourself in those ancient creatures swimming in oceans unimaginably different, yet recognizably similar to today's. If this has resonated with you, please subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what struck you most, what surprised you, what you're thinking about now. This conversation spans time, and your voice matters in it. The Cambrian happened. It made you possible. Now you're happening, and through you, the story continues. Rest well, knowing you're connected to everything that ever lived. The explosion continues tomorrow, and you're part